Welcome to Haverchat, a Haverkamp culture cast where we take you behind the scenes at Haverkamp Group. My name is Todd Wiesenberg, and I am the Chief Culture Officer at Haverkamp. This is the final episode of an 8-part series in which we introduce you to the men and women who are the executives or key leaders within Haverkamp. Today's guest is Paul Wilken, the Chief Operations Officer for Haverkamp Group. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
All right, we're just going to jump right into it, and we're going to get the audience connected with you through what we like to call the 4 F's, the from, family, fun, and future. So, Paul, let's just start with the from. Where are you from? Born, raised? Tell us about your professional journey. What led you to where you're at today?
Okay. Originally born in Fairfield, Iowa, and but spent most of my life growing up in and going to school in Palmer, which is northwest Iowa. Very, very small farm community.
So you were born in, or you spent most of your time in Palmer. So
Yes.
That's your from. What got you to Iowa State University, where we actually met,
Sure.
35 years ago or so.
So interestingly, my family had moved to Ohio, and I had stayed in Palmer to graduate, and then decided to go to school at Iowa State because I wanted to be an engineer. And so I was the only one in our family that stayed in Iowa, and went to school at Iowa State for computer engineering. Later switched to electrical engineering, and graduated there and worked at Rockwell in Cedar Rapids for Rockwell Collins in Cedar Rapids for 3.5 years, and then moved to John Deere in Ankeny for 3.5 years. And at that time, Brent and I got together, and I had known Brent a little bit from college. Mm-hmm. And I had been thinking about starting a business, and Brent asked me if I would be interested in purchasing a Jiffy Lube and touch-free car wash with him. And so we bought those together. And from there, we started kind of a group of retail businesses. Mm-hmm. And over that time, over the next, maybe 10 years, we opened or started as many as 20 different businesses and locations, retail. We owned those together. I ran all of the retail side. Brent stayed with real estate, and he ran the real estate side of things. And that's where he and I got together and started working together. In about the 2008, 2009 timeframe, the so-called Great Recession. Some of our retail businesses were struggling, and Brent was starting to get several banks calling him, asking him if they could help him out with some of his, if he could help them out with some of their foreclosed properties. Mm-hmm. And I remember Brent called me one day and he said, "Hey, what do you think about selling all the retail and just doing real estate?" And so we did that, and I joined forces with him as CFO of Havercamp Properties at that time. Mm-hmm. And you and I worked closely together back in those days, as you I'm sure you recall. And then a few years later, Brent decided to hire Jeff Bramble in to take over Havercamp Properties, and then Brent and I moved to a different location where I became Chief Investment Officer. We moved everything other than Havercamp Properties to that other location, so Havercamp Construction was there. And my primary responsibility then became looking at new investments. So among different things, that's also where we started. During that time, we started the farms division. And so we looked at lots of different things. We looked at some private equity investments and obviously additional real estate investments. And then, maybe 5-6 years ago, we were working with Jeff, and we decided that there could be quite a few synergies if we would take all of these collection of real estate-based businesses, the construction side, the acquisition and development side, the Haverkamp property side, and the farms, and just sort of merge them all together and try to build on those synergies. And that's where Haverkamp Group came from. And so at that point, I switched back to being CFO of Haverkamp Group. A couple years later, when Jeff announced his retirement, I switched over to Chief Operating Officer and took his position over Haverkamp Group. And so that's where I'm at today.
Paul, that was a lot. That was a lot to track.
Yes.
Wow. I love the stories there, and we will unpack some of those stories more. I do want to go back to you and Brent's relationship. And actually, Paul, you and I connected, and Brent, I think we have one common connection, Chad Geiken.
That's funny. Yes.
Yes.
Very much so.
So I think really where, we started connecting was on the basketball court.
Yes. Chicken Man.
Chicken. Yes. That was his nickname.
Yes.
So just curious, Paul, who was a better basketball player, you or Brent?
Brent and I have one thing in common, and that's we were both role players. So that's all you need to know. So it's we watch everyone else play. Yeah.
The other thing you guys have in common, besides your love for business and basketball, is you guys were both state champions in basketball.
We were. There's I tell this story sometimes. Several years ago, I was in a meeting. There's a group of 12 people that came together to look at a development project. And all 12 people that were there were very successful entrepreneurs. And when we were talking, it became, I don't know how we got to it, but somehow we discovered that all 12 of us had been state champions, had played on a team that was a state champion, had a state championship, that had a state championship, and yet none of us were the star players on any of those teams.
Interesting.
And so I've reflected on that quite a bit over the years, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think that team sports causes you to strive to win, and you're competing with your teammates for positions, but you don't let that competition between teammates hinder your ability to help your team win overall.
That's interesting, Paul, about the 12 entrepreneurs. I mean, it does not surprise me that that you would have that kind of common thread. It really makes sense. Going back to back to you and Brent meeting together on a business purpose. How long have you guys? How many years have you guys been connected from a business standpoint?
Well, I think if you go back to Chad Geiken's days.
Okay.
What was interesting about Chad Geiken is Chad was involved in an investment club back in those days. And so there's a group of guys that were sort of all tied together that had kind of a business investment mindset. And some of those guys are, someone like a Dixon Jensen. And so most of them were older than me. And so I sort of knew them through Chad. Chad was younger than some of those other guys. But there's kind of a string of a group of people that were all like-minded when it came to investments and entrepreneurship. And
it was through that investment club that is kind of where you first got connected with Brent.
So Chad introduced me to Brent through basketball, but I didn't really know Brent. And then through the investment side, I would hear about what those guys are doing, but I wasn't in the investment club because I was younger than them.
Okay, gotcha.
And then when I was a junior in high school, a junior in college, I decided to try to buy my own rental property and rent to my roommates. And so I started looking at rental properties, and I found a house, and Chad suggested that I have Brent look at that house before I purchased it because Brent had just purchased his first rental property.
Oh, okay.
And so Brent came over and he walked through it with me and gave me his opinions on whether or not I should buy that house. And that's where we sort of first connected directly on an investment side of things. But from there, even then, we didn't talk very much for the next several years. I went back, I worked at Rockwell, I came back, worked for John Deere, and I had looked at buying the J. Philube at one point, and it was just too much for me. And then the owner had talked to Brent, and Brent said, he was interested in it. He had the finances for it, but he didn't have the time to run it. And so he'd heard I might be interested. And so that's where he called me up to ask about that.
Back to that rental house that Brent looked at with you.
Yes.
Did you buy it?
I did buy it.
Did it work out well for you?
Yeah, it worked out great. So,
so his advice was good.
It was.
All right.
I was a junior in college, and it took me. I think I went to 19 banks to get financing.
Oh wow!
Because who wants to loan money to a college student?
Well, obviously, 18 banks did not want to.
That is true. That is true. And so I rented to two roommates. Chad was one of them. Of my first tenants, and then I sold that place a few years later for 50% more than I paid for it. So it worked out great.
That does work out great. That's good math.
Yes.
That's good math. Okay, let's move on to the next F. And you started talking about family. Talk about your family growing up, your current family, whatever you're comfortable sharing about your family.
Sure. My dad There are a lot of similarities between my dad and Brent's dad.
Yes.
Brent's father was an immigrant from Netherlands, if I remember right, who had to learn English. My dad grew up in a German community in Illinois, and his parents and him were both born in the United States, but it was a German community that spoke German, and English was actually his second language. So he learned that when he went to the public schools, and very hard worker, extremely hard worker. And my mother, she was from Wisconsin, and she was a very structured person. There's a lot of structure, and I'm not sure if I'd use the word perfectionist, but she was a person who did things with excellence. And so she would always, she taught us how to write a paper, for example. She was an English teacher. She would teach us how to write a paper and put together an outline. She was a major planner. And so we knew how to structure and write a paper by the time we were sixth grade fairly well. And when I mentioned the excellence thing, I think each one of us kids in my family won the science fair. And it wasn't the kind of thing today where a parent makes sure that their kids win everything. We didn't win because we were trying to win. We won because my parents always made sure we did things with excellence. And so doing things with excellence simply resulted in a win. And it was a different type of attitude. And so those two things, played a large part in how I think today. My wife is great. My wife, if I were to say one thing about her as Jamie, is that she loves people. And in particular, she has a passion for international students. And so she has taught international students at Iowa State now for a lot of years, teaches English. Over the years, she has frequently had people international students to our house. I think last year we did a Thanksgiving international student event here at Haverkamp Group, where we had several dozen international students come here for Thanksgiving. So she tries to help them get a taste of American culture, well beyond what is expected of a teacher, and so it's no surprise that my son ended up marrying a Korean. So my son is married to a lady from South Korea, and he now works for Texas Instruments in Boston. My daughter Libby, she is studying in Italy, and she is dating an Italian. So a second international flavor. My oldest daughter, Sarah, works here at Haverkamp Group, which is just great. I get to see her every day. I eat lunch with her today. It's just a lot of fun, to have her around. And then my youngest is at UNI, and she plays in the band there, and she is extraordinarily busy. I didn't know until she started playing band for UNI. I knew that college athletes have an atrocious schedule, right? Trying to balance all those things. I had no idea that people in the band have just as tough of a schedule. She's constantly going to events, and she's trying to juggle, everything from her school to working a little bit to all the band events to her church activities, and it's just a lot. She has a lot going on. So,
where did you meet Jamie? How did you guys, just tell a story about courting Jamie.
Where did I meet Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to decide if I want to go there. So the way that I met Jamie is that my roommate introduced me to his girlfriend. So,
okay.
And that is how I met Jamie.
Okay.
So maybe we should just end it with that.
We'll just end it with that. That was while you were at Iowa State University.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you guys,
Jamie and I didn't date till well after they had quit dating. So they quit dating at least a year before her and I started dating. But I should add that Drew and Hansel are pregnant, and they have, so that'll be our first grandchild. And it'll be a boy, and he is due on December 9th. So that will change my life just a little bit. So.
Yes, it will. And our son is expecting in January. He and his wife are expecting in January. So that means we'll be grandfathers for the first time, very close in time.
Sure.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, that is close.
That is close. Huh. Very close.
Caleb?
Yeah, Caleb.
Okay.
Yeah, Caleb and Maddie. Thanks for sharing all those things about your family. Like I said, I really enjoy your family and being able to spend time with them. And I'm going to switch to our third F, and that's fun. What are some hobbies or passions or interests that you have, things you like to do for fun?
what I think is interesting about that is how much things change as you get older, and so, in also different phases of life. So, for example, a few years ago when my kids were younger, basketball was the hobby because that's what my kids were doing. And then as soon as they were done with that, then I don't know if I've watched 5 basketball games since then. So that era just ended abruptly.
I can relate.
Yeah, and so I enjoy it. It's just done. And now I spend most of my time. My 2 biggest passions or hobbies would probably be walking and reading. So last year I read I think 42 books. I say read in quotes. 12 books are probably actual books and 30 were probably audible. And that's because I do a lot of walking. So I like to listen to books and walk. So
having known you for as long as I have, in fact, I credit you for influencing me on being a reader and how important reading is. So I know reading has always just been a part of your life. How many books do you think you've read in your lifetime?
When I was in 3rd grade, we had a reading contest. And it was 2 months long, and the second place person, I believe, had 800 pages, and I won with just over 10,000. And that was in 2 months in 3rd grade. And so I don't know how many books I've read. I know in my library I have a few shelving units of books. And I remember one day I was kind of just going through there looking at them, and I realized I'd actually read all of them, and that just kind of blew my mind because I was like, there's a lot of books in here, and I've read every one of these books. So I wouldn't even know how to guess. There's been times in my life where I've just been too busy, and there's been years I've read probably less than 10. But then there's years when I read, I don't know, hundreds probably, but I'm not sure.
I think it was Truman that said, all leaders are readers, but not all readers obviously are leaders. But why is reading so critical to leadership?
I think it's part of the attitude of just learning, right? And you always have to have an attitude of learning. There's certain things in life that sometimes you're almost embarrassed to say that you were tied to, or they were, but they had significant impacts on your life. And one of the things that had the most impact on my life, ironically, was Amway. And so when I was in college, I came across Amway, which turned out to be a disaster. But during those years involved with it, during that time period with Amway, there was a lot of motivational speakers at the time, and they just really pressed on you the importance of reading and learning. And so that's where I started doing things like Franklin Day Planner type things, and reading about time management. And so when I read books like Stephen Covey's Seven Habits, and just a whole host of books on how to improve your life and how to be more successful in this area or that, and so that's where I sort of switched from reading what I'd say mostly fiction books to more books on improving some aspect of your life, more educational books.
Okay.
So
the 4th and final F, future. So when you think about the future, what would you say to people when they ask you about the future at Haverkamp Group, maybe your future, when you think about future, what comes to your mind?
I think Havercamp Group really has turned a corner the last few years. We have this vision of 10x in 20 years, and part of that vision, resulted in this Havercamp Group of merging these businesses together. So it really brings in this concept of vertical integration and the power and the synergies of bringing those things together, and add that to the new venture with Haverkamp Investments, in bringing in other people to invest alongside us. And so the potential for exponential growth is really there. And, you think about, where we were, 15 years ago with 30, 40 employees, and today we have 150 employees. And And when you go, I think right now in our 10X plan, to get to 10X, we still need another 6X. Well, 6X probably isn't 6 times as many employees, but it's probably 4 times as many employees.
Right.
So that's probably 600 people. And it's really hard to get your mind around having 30 or 40 people just not that long ago to 600.
Right.
Every quarterly all company meeting that we have to find a different venue. It's just, it's crazy, right? You think if we find a venue that we think is great, and it doesn't matter, we can't go back, right? So we've got to find a bigger one next time. And that's just a lot of fun. And thinking of the next week we may be going and looking at a property in South Dakota, and last week we were looking at a property in Nebraska, and next in a few weeks I'm going to be heading to Minnesota. Well, it wasn't that long ago we were in Ames, not Iowa, Ames. Yeah. And then we went from Ames to different markets in Iowa, and now we're talking about different states.
Yes.
And so it's just that growth, and I think where that's really important is, I often have told people over the years, it's actually relatively difficult as an employee to move up in a company, because someone's got to quit or retire or something to move up, and that doesn't happen every day. And so let's say you have a manager who has 6 people that report to them. Well, if they do quit, only 1 out of the 6 moves up. Where growth really, really takes place for employees is when the company grows, and so that the company grows below you, and so that is where that's where you really have a lot of opportunity. And I think for people who work for Haverkamp Group, the excitement, if you think about it, if we have 600 employees instead of 150 employees, that's probably 1 extra level of management, which means everybody today theoretically could have someone underneath of them working for them, and them being in a management role if they chose to do so. Right. And some people wouldn't want to, and some people it's not the right fit. But the potential to move up without moving at all, just because the company moved because of the company's growth, I think is just phenomenal, and that's exciting. It gives everybody opportunities.
Absolutely. Talking about company growing out from underneath, we're celebrating Dave Hyman's 24th work anniversary, and he still reports to you. He reported to you 24 years ago as a part-time maintenance technician, and now he's reporting to you today as the president of Haverkamp Properties.
Yes, and that's been 24 years, and Chris reports to me, and he first reported. Well, actually, he didn't report to me directly. He did. Moved up through the line as well as having the company grow below him. Yeah. And Zach actually worked for me before he worked for Brent as well. Right. So he worked. So Dave and Zach switched, right? So Dave actually started with working for Brent on the project management side, and Zach worked for me on the retail management side. And so then over the year, or then shortly thereafter, we realized it was just a better fit to switch them. Yeah. So Brent and I worked out a trade, and so that's how that happened. But
were there any future draft picks in this trade, or is it just a straight up trade?
So it was a straight up trade, but yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, you talk about Dave, you talk about Chris, Zach. Yeah. There's kind of this theme going on throughout the organization about current leaders and how long they've been here and how long they've worked with you. And so it's inspiring to hear those stories in those previous podcasts, and then just to hear you talk now, how inspiring that is for people who are a part of the organization today about the opportunities that may present themselves. I say, although we've been in business for 31 years, I often say I feel like anyone who's joining the organization now because of the 10X plan, it's like they're getting in on the ground level of something really exciting.
Yeah, there really is a lot of fun there. And, the nice thing is our company is small enough to be very entrepreneurial, but it's large enough to have the resources to do quite a few things. Yeah. And really, the EOS model is intended to really let people shine and work in their area. And you just look at the new things that we're doing differently every day. There's a lot of change, and there's the support for people to do things, when it makes sense. So,
a word you've used a couple different times so far in our conversation is the word synergy. Mm-hmm. You talked about how synergy was what caused you to want to think about Haverkamp Group. You just used synergy when you talked about future. When you use that word, what does that mean? I mean, tell me more why synergy seems to be a very purposeful word that you're using today.
It's interesting. I used that word earlier today in a completely different context. And when I think of the word synergy, I think of how any two things or two people can do more together than if they do things separately.
Right.
So we were talking earlier today about when you bring a few people in a meeting to come up with ideas or to make a decision on something. And so let's say you get three people who come in and person one gives their solution, and another person gives a solution, their solution, and a third person gives their ideas. And if you're not careful, what will happen is they'll debate and fight over which one is the right one. And so that is which one is the best, and it's that's a counterproductive argument. What is a very productive situation is where those three come together and they present their ideas, and they give the pros and cons of each other's ideas. And then they look at those and they say, oh, let's come up with idea number 4. And idea number 4 is a little bit of each. It might be more dominant one than another. But it comes out with something much better than any one of the three would have done on their own. And, and so the synergy of bringing people together, working as a team and looking for the right solution, as opposed to trying to win with their solution. Yeah.
So it's this idea of collaboration is kind of what I'm hearing you say. And I know you're a math guy. So 1 + 1 + 1 normally equals 3, but in synergy, 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 4.
Yes.
Okay.
And or the better way I would say it is 2 + 2 + 2 equals 6.
Okay.
But with synergy, 2 × 2 × 2 = 8.
Okay.
So there you go. So you're multiplying the efforts as opposed to adding them up.
All right.
So maybe that works.
Maybe that works. Well, and we'll talk about your math skills here in a few minutes. So yeah, we were very intentional to make you our 8th and final guest on Haverchat. We started off with Brent, founder, CEO. We have you kind of look at you as bookends. And, as we think about you guys as being bookends for, Haverkamp Group, what comes to mind as you guys being bookends? How do you guys complement each other? How do you guys work together? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Brent and I, we've worked together for a long time. You talk about the synergies and the numbers. What I have said for a long time is if Brent could get 14% return on something, and if I could achieve a 12% return on something, together we can get 16%. It's that synergy, the synergistic effect. And because we each make each other better. If we are doing a negotiation, for example, we negotiate far better together than separately because we see things differently. We're not the same. We're very different. We get along great, but we just think differently.
Warren Buffett had Charlie Munger. Are you Brent's Charlie in this relationship?
That's a good question. I've heard that comparison before. To compare me to Charlie Munger is I mean, wow. Okay, if only, right? If only.
Okay.
So it's yeah, maybe that'd be like trying to compare me to Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. I'm no Scott.
There's a gap. You're saying there's a gap.
Yes, there's a gap. I'm no Scottie Pippen, and I'm certainly no Charlie Munger.
Well, the point being that Warren had somebody in his life that could speak to him in such a way. In fact, I think Warren once said that or maybe it was Charlie who said that Warren thinks every idea I have is bad. He just has to discern which is the best of my bad ideas.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So they had that kind of relationship. That's my point. Do you think that's the kind of a relationship you and Brent have, or you can just speak to
absolutely.
each other?
Yeah. So we're reading in our book club right now the book Radically Candor.
Right.
Is that the right word? Radically.
Yeah. Radically Candor.
So we're reading Radically Candor, and and there's certainly a lot of truth to that. And Brent knows that I'm willing to say things to him that others may not be willing to say. And the nice thing is Brent's willing to listen to those things, right? And so it takes two people for that to happen, right? Brent welcomes advice, even if he doesn't want to hear some things, and I'm willing to give advice sometimes more than I should, and that really it's kind of what I get back to when I get back to what I mentioned before, which was, when you get a meeting together and you have three different competing ideas. Well, that only works if everyone's willing to listen to each other, right? And Brent's great at listening, and so Brent obviously is very sharp, comes up with a lot of really good stuff, but the two of us working together just makes things a little bit better. So,
bottom line, you guys have a high level of trust with one another.
Yes,
I think that's one way I could kind of succinct that is trust is really high between the two of you.
Yeah, and we've learned over the time each other's weaknesses and strengths. And so we know I know where I should trust his ideas better than mine, and he knows where he should trust my ideas better than his, because we know each other's strengths.
I'm going to use the word typical in air quotes here. What's a typical week look like for Paul Wilken?
Now, if you ask Colleen, my assistant, she would just say meetings. and meetings never end. And so she gets the task of getting to juggle around my calendar. So I think it's my main focus is kind of on two areas. It'll sound simple, but it's mostly focused on where are we today and where are we going tomorrow. And where are we today is a lot of just keeping up on scorecard items. How are we looking on finances? How are we looking on just the tasks that we have set in front of us? With the EOS system, how are we looking on where we are with our rocks? And where are we going tomorrow? A key part of the where are we going tomorrow is the we. And so who is the we, and making sure the right people are in the right places, and then the where, of course, is the other part, and making sure everything's put in the right place so that we can go to where where we want to go. Clearly, Brent and I can't do anything without a great team, and it's interesting. When I look at our team of people, the leadership team in particular, there is something about every person on our leadership team that is clearly better than me, right? So each person on our leadership team has skills that I can't touch. And in fact, sometimes I look around and think about how good some of those guys are, guys and gals. I ask myself, am I in the right place? Because some of these people are just they're a lot better than I am, and that's really true. A phenomenal leadership team.
Paul, I've had the fortune of working with you for a while, and most recently, you and I have a regular pattern of getting together every other week and talking about culture. What role does culture play in our organization?
So, the odd thing is your position is Chief Culture Officer. And the strange thing, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but every time we ask the question or talk about the culture of Haverkamp Properties and Haverkamp Group, I actually cringe just a little bit. And the reason I do that is because I become afraid that I'll celebrate our company's culture. I think we have a great culture, but it's sort of like if a church celebrated their church instead of celebrating God. You have a great church because of your common goal. In the same way, if we celebrate our culture, that I become afraid sometimes that'll take away from what we really should be celebrating, which is our people. Right. And celebrating our people is what makes our culture, right? And having the right people with a common goal. And so what I think makes a great culture is when you have a group of people who have a shared purpose, and they're intentional and excited about that shared purpose. And so there's a lot that goes into it. I think if you over celebrate company culture, you start to give yourself a pat on the back as a leadership team. And in the end, that's not going to serve you well. I think from a leadership team perspective, you try to put together the framework that promotes a culture, but in the end, it's the people that work in this organization that create that culture.
Absolutely. So I'll say amen. just like as if I was in church or something. But yeah, we have talked about, you've got the kind of the macro culture, sure, but macro culture is made up of lots of great mini cultures.
Yes.
And what makes up those great mini cultures, again, it's the people in those teams and those locations, all that is what makes up, no question, it's the people that make up the great culture.
Yeah, it's we talk sometimes with our Ativo trails, for example. Our Ativo trails are very successful, not because they're great buildings, but because we have a great people with a great community, right? The community is what attracts people there in the end. And it's the reason why the residents there want to stay, and that culture starts with when you walk in, you walk into a Ativo trail in Ankeny, and you're going to have, Renee greet them at the front with a smile, and she's going to be right there ready to help them out, and she's not thinking about how am I going to manage this property. She's thinking about how am I going to help these people. Right. And you think about property management, and I'm moving a little bit away from the culture topic here for a second, but we talked about the retail world that we come from, and Dave Hyman, who runs property management, he worked with me on the retail for several years. And one of the things I like to say about our property management side is that name is sort of the wrong name, because property management is what a lot of our competitors do. They manage a property. And our property management company thinks about people. It's why our slogan is, we're building communities where people love to live. It's because the focus is on, the residents as opposed to taking care of the property. Right. And sort of that retail customer centric focus. So that is really a key part of the culture on that side of the business is that people-centric focus.
Absolutely. As we talk about mission statements and purpose statements, Haverkamp Group has growing together through real estate. What does that statement mean to you?
Well, that's a loaded statement, right? There's so many different ways you can go with that.
Exactly.
Right? So part of it is simply the growing the investments side of it, right? So you have we have a lot of investors, and we have a lot of investment, and so we're trying to grow an investment and make it a profitable investment. We have quite a few retired people. They have entrusted us with their retirement and making sure that those investments do well for them, so they have a secure retirement. You have the growing together of the people and working together. I think of there's a guy that I met the other day during one of our onboarding sessions, named
Danzel.
Danzel, yes.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And so and I'm talking to when I talked to Danzel, I said, Danzel, where do you want to be 10, 15 years from now? And Danzel, he said, I want to do something with HVAC systems. I'd like to learn the trades, and probably HVAC, and maybe someday run my own HVAC company. And just like I worked, at Rockwell and John Deere, and then I didn't end up staying there. Those were instrumental on where I am today. Right. And during those years, I really helped Rockwell and I really helped John Deere. And in the same way, with Danzel, I would love to see us help Danzel get to where he wants to be, and there's, again, we get to those synergies and common goals. If we can teach Danzel how to become better at the trades and how to do better at HVAC systems, we're going to get the benefit from him while he's working for us. And someday he can use that to go do what he wants to do. Now, hopefully that path ends up being the same, and he works for us for years to come. But if not, and if we're just a stepping stone, well, we all grew during the time that he was here, and and that would just be great. Right. And that's where I like to think about each person that works for us is how do we become interested in where all of us are going, and growing together doesn't always mean staying together. In fact, maybe 25 years from now, long after you and I are gone, maybe someone in Haverkamp Construction is going to call Danzel's HVAC company and say, "Hey, can you give us a bid for some new apartments we're building?" That would be just wonderful.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about Sherry for a minute. Our core values.
Yes.
Stewardship, hard work, accountability, results driven, and integrity. Which of those values speaks the most to you or motivates you the most?
So you said stewardship, and as you know, there's the S depends on where you are in the company. So Haverkamp Group and everyone other than Haverkamp Properties has stewardship, and Haverkamp Properties substitutes service instead of stewardship. Those two, there's been an internal debate over the years as to which one, if we should go with just one of them, and they are sort of both of them to some extent come from, in my mind, they come from the second greatest command. So if you go to the Bible, you have the first. They ask Jesus, what is the most important commandment? And he says the most important is to love God, and the second one is like it, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you look at that phrase, love your neighbor as yourself, there's sort of two parts to it. There's the yourself and there's the love that I'm going to focus on. So to do something as yourself means to treat something as though it's your own. And so that's the stewardship concept. Okay, so I'm going to, when I think about an employee and anyone on our team, what would I want if I were in their shoes? So that to think from that lens. If I'm thinking of an investor, what would I want if I was from theirs? If I was in their position? When I look at a property we manage, if this is my property, what would I want? If I was a tenant and I was here, how would I want to be treated? And so you have that aspect of it. So stewardship is a key part of the love your neighbor as yourself. The other part though is love, and love is an action. In particular in this context, love is an action, and there's no greater example of love than service, right? Service and sacrifice. And so service is a critical part of that love your neighbor as yourself. And so the stewardship and service, some people say, aren't they kind of the same thing? And I say, no, they're actually two ends. In fact, they're the bookends of the love your neighbor as yourself. I think more likely over time, as time goes on, we'll find a way to put both S's and both into the core values of Sherry. But the reason we picked different ones for different places is because Haverkamp Properties focuses on, they're more outward focused on their tenants, and so the service in that context, we believe service is the more critical part of that. Whereas Haverkamp Construction and Haverkamp Group and Haverkamp Investments, their side of the business is more focused on investors and asset management, and where we're taking care of things like the real estate itself and people's dollars. And so there, we like to focus more on the word of stewardship. Right. But it's really two sides of the same phrase, which is love your neighbor as yourself.
That was deep, and I'm a simple man, Paul. And sometimes when I describe it, I say, it's like tennis, forehand, backhand, yours is better. I think I might start using yours instead.
Maybe it's too long.
Yeah. That was rich. So stewardship is the core value that just resonates with you the most, would you say?
Yes, probably.
Okay. Well, that's the core value that I also associate with you. I mean, I know it's important to you, but I do see you as a person who really values just taking something that's been entrusted to them, and you used this word earlier. It's how you grew up, excellence. You want to take what was given to you, and you want to treat it with excellence and return it back better than how you got it. And so, stewardship is definitely what I think about you. Also, having spent time in your office, on your whiteboard for the longest time, you had two letters written up there, LO. Do you want to talk about those two letters for a moment?
Sure. Yeah, I had that up there for a long time, and I put it intentionally very small up in the corner. I didn't want anyone to ask me about it. It wasn't there. It wasn't there as a teaser. It was there purely as a reminder, so that I would see it constantly. And as life goes on, you learn different things. You get older, and maybe you get wiser, and maybe you become more foolish in other areas. I don't know, but it really struck me one day the importance of love, and I realized how critical that was. and it sounds so cliche. I mean, just I don't know how you get more cliche than that. And so it was like, if I just focus on that, and from this point forward, this conversation might get a little corny. So I apologize in advance.
So this is a disclaimer right now.
There's a disclaimer right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it might get a little corny. But I'm not good at this at all. Okay. There's a reason I put that up on the corner of the corner of my board, and it's because I'm not good at it. It's something I have to work on. It is not natural to me at all. I'm not sure it's natural to anyone, to be honest with you. But I truly believe that if every time you walked into a meeting, if you could ask yourself, if you could think through every person in that meeting and ask yourself as you're walking that meeting, do I love that person? How can I love that person? And for each person individually, that meeting and the success of that meeting would just be off the charts,
right?
And if each person did that, it'd just be amazing. And so I've told that to several people in the past, and I very, very rarely do that, and yet I think it's very important, So it was interesting. I really hit this message or this idea of I need to get better at loving others, and loving others really is the secret. It really is. Mm-hmm. And it was sometime after that, I was at the EOS National Conference, and Gino, who did EOS, was speaking, and he talked about the top 10 things to being a great leader. And when he got to number 1, he said, I know this is going to be super cliche, but this is the most important thing. And up on the screen, comes the 4-letter word love. And I was like, yeah, that's what I've been thinking, and so then just literally not too far from there, we had John Maxwell come, and we had that event down in Des Moines, right, that we helped sponsor. And after that, there was the luncheon, and at the luncheon, people got to ask John different questions. And the very last question, he said, okay, we have time for one more question. And a guy got up and said, a guy got up and asked a question, and he said, what of all the things you've taught and all the things you know about leadership, if you were to sum it all up, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to be a leader? Mm-hmm. And Maxwell, without any hesitation, said, that's easy. Love people. That's the entire secret. Mm-hmm. And I thought, there it is again. And I was like, why have I been so blind for so long? And and then Jesus, what's the second, the in his commandment of love your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, okay, it's out there everywhere. Why did it take me so long to figure that out? But it's hard. It's really, really hard. It's just not natural, right? We all tend to think about ourselves and me just as much as anyone else. But there's a reason I put it on my board, and it's because I have to be reminded.
Yeah. No, that's actually wise, Paul. We all have to remind ourselves of the things that are most important, because our tendency is to put the focus on ourselves. And we need to constantly remind ourselves why we're here as leaders, and it is to serve, it is to love others. And so, I'm glad you put those letters on there, because we always need those reminders. You talked about your team. You've mentioned different names, but is there anybody that you want to give a shout out to? Who's letting their sherry shine? Who's living out core values that you just want to give an opportunity to? You have your opportunity now to give a shout out to them.
I've seen you ask that question to other people,
right?
And every time I see that, I think, how in the world do you answer that question? Because I would hate to leave someone out, right? And when I look at our leadership team in particular, I don't want anyone on the leadership team that isn't strong in all of the Sherry values, right? Mm-hmm. So right from the beginning, I could list all of them, right? So
right.
And so if I think through just different letters, like you go through stewardship, and Tanya's off the charts on stewardship, and I guess you sort of want your CFO to be off the charts on stewardship.
Yes.
So that's a given, right? And and Dave is phenomenal at service. Mm-hmm. And Chris is another one who's real strong on the stewardship side. And Zach, when you look at Zach from hard work, the guy, when he comes in from start to finish, there's no there's no messing arodd. Zach, the moment he steps his foot in the office to the moment he steps out, he is serious business. And Jessica is accountability all over the place. I mean, Jessica is so dependable that it's easy to forget her. Because I'm often called into where the problems are, and there just aren't problems where Jessica is, and so I just never get called there. So it's almost to her demise. I feel bad about it sometimes because I think I haven't had to talk to Jessica all week because her stuff just happens because she's just phenomenal on the accountability side. And Tron is interesting because on the farm side, it's easy to look at Tron and say, oh my goodness, the hard work here is off the charts, but Tron is driven by stewardship, and it is his stewardship value that drives his hard work, and so I'd have to put him on that stewardship side as well, but going back to Dave, I'm gonna give Dave two of them. I mentioned Dave for service because there is not many people who are the first, whenever something needs to be done, like someone needs to carry a cooler or something for some event, he's the first one to just go over there and grab it and help out. Right. And he's always had that attitude, but Dave is off the charts, results driven.
Yes, he is.
I mean, he's just, and so, and then Colleen lives for service, right? She's, it's her strong point. She's great there. And I'm probably missing someone here. But it's interesting because if you wanted me to give a shout out, the shout out I would actually give is for you, because I think that Haverkamp Group's culture is probably set by you as much as anyone, and so I think you've had a more of a people centric, people driven. I don't know how to say it. Your thought process on. You've always, for as long as I've known you, you've said the business is about the people, and you would have people read books about people and how to manage people and how to interact with each other, and I think that has really driven our culture for decades. Not that you're decades old, so you're a young guy that's had more years of impact than you really are in age, we'll say. But no, you've had a huge impact on our culture, and I think and I think we now benefit from over 20 years of that.
Well, thank you, Paul. When people talk to me about, where I'm at, and I have to give a lot of back to Brent, back to you, because at the heart, I know you guys, having been around you for as long as I have, that you guys really do care about people, and, people are important. I mean, Brent just said that at our quarterly all company meeting. He looked across the room and he expressed, here's the greatest resource for Haverkamp is the people sitting in this room. So I know both you and Brent have that as a strong value, people. And I just am fortunate that I get to work with you guys and exercise, if you will, a gift, or be able to use that to help us all. And well, thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So. All right. Any updates, any news, anything you want to celebrate, anything?
Yeah, I think there are, I think there's a few areas coming up that are pretty exciting. Right now we're finishing up on raising investment for the Prairie Point investment, which has been our first fund that we've raised money for with Haverkamp Investments, and that has been a huge success. We have two new projects coming up. We have a TiVo Trail Waukee we have a TiVo Trail Omaha that we're looking at. We close on the land on that maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It's soon. And then we're looking at a few properties. We just verbally agreed to a property in the Des Moines area for a project probably that's going to start next year.
Nice.
And so, we'll be looking for investment in those as well. And I think both those are exciting. We've have a few acquisition possibilities. We have, interestingly, we thought this would happen a little sooner than it did, but we thought with the interest rate environment that we would start to see some opportunities of some people who overextended, and it is now just starting to happen. We've the last few weeks, we've increasingly received more calls from banks saying, "Hey, we've got a property that's overextended. Can you help us out with that? And so I think there's some opportunities that could be coming up here in the future on the acquisition side.
Haverchamps. It's that time, Paul. Yeah, I know you're familiar with Haverchamps. It's our rapid fire question game where you try to answer as many questions as possible within 94 seconds. And again, the significance of 94 seconds is an acknowledgement of 1994 when Brent started the business. You can pass if you want. There was some joking going on that I should change up all the questions to being math questions because you are phenomenal with math. And in fact, we were just visiting with Tron a little bit ago. He said, yeah, you should just give Paul a bunch of long division questions and he'll just probably rock it, So, but there are not going to be any math questions. Okay. So full disclosure, no math questions. But if you want to skip some, you can. You're allowed up to 3 skips. The score is based on the number of questions that you answer. Tron was is at the top of the leaderboard. He had 32 correct answers, I think is what it was. Yeah, I'm getting a head nod from Graydon over there. So Tron had 32 questions that he answered. So are you ready? We're going to get 94 seconds on the clock here.
I give it my best shot.
You give it your best shot. I'll read through these. I'm the biggest variable, as I like to say in this. It's all about how many questions I can ask, how quickly, and the structure of those. So, Paul, are you ready? This is serious now.
Yes.
All right. Soda or pop?
Soft drink.
What's your favorite soft drink?
Pepsi.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning.
What's your favorite season?
Fall.
Beach vacation, mountain getaway?
Mountain.
Do you prefer books or movies?
Books.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Nope.
Favorite color?
Red.
What's your favorite holiday?
4th of July.
City life or country living?
Country.
Favorite restaurant?
Panera.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Favorite podcast?
Ramsey.
If you would time travel, past or future?
Future.
Hot or cold weather?
Cold.
Comedy or drama?
Comedy.
Would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
Fly.
Have dinner with any historical figure who?
Isaac Newton.
Roller coasters, love them, hate them?
Hate them.
Vegetables or fruits?
Fruits.
Do you believe in aliens?
No.
What's your favorite pizza topping?
Ham.
Favorite board game?
Monopoly.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
Cyclones or Hawkeyes?
Cyclones.
How do you like your eggs cooked?
Over easy.
What's one word that best describes you?
Tired.
Favorite Haverkamp core value?
Stewardship.
Describe our company culture in one word.
Sherry.
One thing that always makes you smile at work.
Choline.
Favorite company event or tradition?
Christmas party.
A skill that helps you in your job.
Writing.
One thing about Haverkamp that you brag about. Culture is the answer.
Culture.
Proudest moment in your career. This moment right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Was that all the time? What did we get to?
35.
35.
Is that enough to win?
Yeah, that's enough to win. So,
Okay. So the tired answer.
that was funny.
Yeah,
too.
so the tired answer comes from the reason that came to first to mind is because a few weeks ago I mentioned a couple times to my wife that I was tired, and so she pulled up some YouTube clip of some guy who just keeps saying I'm so tired, and it was pretty funny, and so that was top of mind when I said it. So it's just kind of it's a running joke lately at our house is that I say that I'm tired. So, but I'm a morning person, and so in the evenings I'm always ready to go to bed. And I'm like, I'm so tired, and my wife is a night person, so she likes to stay up. So.
Okay, so a couple of your answers, I would like to get some clarification on or some understanding of. First of all, when I asked you Cyclones or Hawkeyes, there was just way too long of a dramatic pause. I don't know if you were going for effect or what the deal was there.
I was just taking a break.
You're just taking a break.
Yes.
You needed to breathe.
I was.
That's so funny. Let's see. There was another one on here that just made me laugh or question.
I started getting brain freeze at the end. It just got to be too much. That's when you asked what's the favorite thing in the company, and the culture.
Culture was the correct answer.
I was just.
So Graydon, we had a final score of 35. So we'll go back and, kind of instant replay count, make sure we're accurate. But if 35, if that score holds, what that means is that our very first guest on the Haverchat episodes had our lowest score, and our last guest on this series had the highest score. I think that's really a reflection on me and my ability to get through questions,
to ask the questions,
and maybe help out my guests a little bit more. I did not help out Brent at all. Sorry, Brent.
So Brent didn't know it was coming, probably.
No.
So everyone else had the benefit of knowing what was coming.
They had the benefit of knowing.
I had as much benefit of knowing it was coming as anyone.
This is true.
I mean, I had 7 before me, and just a lot of benefits.
So, So as we close, what's one thing that you wish you would have said today that you didn't? You pause for a second, reflect, say, "Oh, I wish I would have said this."
If there's anything I wish I would have done, I wish I would have talked about other people more. So,
do you have somebody in particular that you would like to talk about more?
That's a great question. There's just so many stories.
There are so many, and I know you're at the risk of leaving somebody out. I understand that tension.
Yeah, and it takes a team, and there's a lot of stories. I could tell you stories about the farm team, and I could tell you stories about guys like Dominic who are today and this next week are going to work really hard, but just not work really hard. They just take initiative and they jump in and say, where can I help next, or what can I do, and what can I do on my own, and think through and not have to worry someone else about. And you have people like Rain over at the maintenance team over at Emory North Liberty, who he's not just going to help with the maintenance on the apartments there, but he's also going to help out the guys in the construction when they need it, right? And Julio on construction, if he finds a need that Rain needs help with on the existing properties, he's going to go over and help those guys. And and there's so many stories like that of people who are helping each other and working hard, for that common purpose. We talked about the common purpose, and I wish I had more time to just tell those stories. So,
Paul, we started off the beginning of this episode talking about teams and talking about how both you and Brent were state champions, and you described yourself and Brent as well as being role players on those state championship teams. Let me tell you, you guys are the stars here. All right.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure that's true, but yes. Thank you.
Well, you're absolutely right. Hey, I'm a team guy, and there's no question we would not be where we're at today if it wasn't for all the many, many men and women in our organization who contribute. Definitely a team guy, but at the end of the day, there's also, you got to have the leaders. I really just appreciate both you and Brent and the leadership that you give to Haverkamp Group. And so just thank you for that. And thank you for your time today. I appreciate you. You got out of a meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. As Colleen would say, meetings. Well, this is kind of a meeting, meeting with Graydon and I here. But yeah, thank you so much for your participation. And so as I wrap up, I want to give a thanks to Graydon, the consistent force behind everything that we've done these last 8 episodes. And want to remind everybody that at Haverkamp, we believe the strongest cultures are cultivated and grown with care. And culture isn't just one person's job. It actually belongs to all of us. It's a team. So until next time, keep learning and keep leading.